Services Minister Scott Morrison joins us from our Sydney studios. Minister, good morning.
Good morning, Barry. Good to be with you.
I'll start with the pension story. Look, I don't expect you to go to cabinet discussions, especially when they're almost a year old now, but how do you feel about these leaks? It does seem to be a steady stream of them, and they seem to be designed to reflect poorly on the Prime Minister.
Well, I think that's a bit of a beat-up, Barry. I mean, this is a story about something that happened over a year ago. I think this has a big use-by date on it. I mean, the great revelation here is that the government decided not to do something, and they had a discussion about a range of different options. I wasn't on ERC at the time, but I really don't think there's anything in that, and I think it's frankly just a bit of a beat-up.
But it was only a week ago there was another leak about this idea on the waiting 6 months for the dole, that the Prime Minister overruled some ministers on that. It's happening regularly.
Well, Barry, the story today, as I said, is over a year old. I suspect it's been sitting around in the drawer for some period of time. If journalists want to connect dots between these things to make points, I'm sure they will, but the government's getting on with good government.
OK, what about the story then that the Prime Minister considered unilateral engagement in Iraq? Did you get a whisper of any of that?
Well, no, I was on the National Security Committee of Cabinet at the time, Barry, and I can confirm what the Prime Minister has said. It is completely fanciful. I think these sorts of stories are now getting quite ridiculous. I mean, what's next? Are they going to suggest that the Prime Minister had some plan to put a manned space mission to Mars or the Moon? I mean, it is really getting quite silly. And the notion that this was put about, I think, is just complete nonsense.
Because committing 3,500 Australian troops unilaterally, that would be a foolhardy exercise, surely.
Well, that's my point, Barry. I mean, I was on the committee at the time. There was no suggestion of anything like this, and I think it's complete nonsense and fanciful as the Prime Minister has suggested.
Well, let's talk now about the Productivity Commission report on childcare, and it is just that at this stage, it's a report. But can you at least commit to a new single subsidy scheme and one that is paid directly to the provider?
Well, the Productivity Commission, I think, has done some excellent work. It is delivering on a coalition-elected commitment to have such an exhaustive inquiry, and I want to pay tribute to the Commission and also all the people who participated, Barry. There was a lot of people, parents, providers, professionals who all contributed, and they've made some excellent recommendations, which we will now have to work through as we frame our package. But the points you make about a simpler system, the points you've made at the Commission of talking about a direct payment to the providers themselves, I think this is feedback I'm picking up directly as well, and we do want a system which enables families, particularly middle to lower income families, sitting around the kitchen table trying to decide, can I go back to work, can we both stay and work to provide for our families? We want to make that decision easier than it is now.
And if all this is going to be revenue neutral and you want it to be, then, and you want to improve the lot for lower income earners, that does necessarily mean, doesn't it, taking some of the benefits away at the top end?
Well, the Productivity Commission has framed their recommendations around a largely budget neutral position, and to ensure that greater support goes into the area where the economic issues are far more prevalent and dominant in the decisions made by families, then that's a natural consequence of that, Barry, and that's why I make this point. I wrote to Kate Ellis a week or so ago. We're meeting next week. If we want to do more in this area, if we want to spend more in this area, then there has to be some agreement on the sorts of savings and offsets that are put in place, and I hope we can agree on those, and I hope we can agree on a package, as we did when we were in opposition, when we dealt with the NDIS and the aged care reforms and changes to family tax benefit payments, where the opposition was, when we were in opposition, very supportive of what the government was trying to do at that time.
You would think you would get Labor Party support, wouldn't you, given that this is income redistribution in a way? You're taking from the rich and giving to the poorer.
Well, how far the package goes and what we're able to do will be very much a function of what can be done with their support for measures in the budget. Now, that's why it's an open invitation. We issued that invitation. I'm pleased that Kate and I will meet next week, and hopefully we can get to a similar place that when we were opposition, we were able to do for the previous government on aged care and the NDIS.
And this is means testing, isn't it? There are sliding scales of benefits, but you're means testing those sliding scales.
Well, there already is a means testing along those lines already, Barry. I mean, you have the childcare benefit and you have the childcare rebate. And when you put those two systems together, you have a system which is not unlike what the Productivity Commission has recommended. So I don't think there's any real change there. The question is whether the subsidies taper off to zero at any one point. The Commission hasn't recommended that, and the current system doesn't provide for that.
Now, one issue providers have raised, though, they're saying that you have to set a median price. If you do that, then by definition, there'll be some people who now pay significantly above the median price, there'll be some who pay less. Those who now pay above the median price will end up being worse off, no matter what their income.
Well, what the Commission has recommended is a benchmark price, Barry, because currently the way the rebate works is you get 50% back on whatever the fee is. Now, this, I believe, has had an inflationary impact on the price of childcare, and where you've got taxpayers paying subsidies for Zumba classes, which was the famous anecdote which came through the various inquiries. Now, that's not something I believe taxpayers want to pay for, and what the Commission is saying is you need to set a benchmark price which deals with the core costs of providing childcare, because what we need to do is put downward pressure on the rising costs.
That's the same as a median price, isn't it? A benchmark price.
Yeah, well, they've suggested a benchmark price, and there are a number of ways you can set a benchmark. They've put forward one option. But we've got to put downward pressure on the rising costs of childcare. I mean, it went up by over 50% under the previous government. They made a lot of changes to increase the quality of childcare, and that's a good thing, but it has come at a price. We now have to address the affordability, because families want quality childcare, but they also want affordable childcare. We don't want a gold-plated system that no one can afford.
Yes, but sometimes it's not because of the gold-plated system that people pay above the median price because they live in inner-city areas or they live in high-demand areas. Sometimes that's what drives the price, and those people will be worse off.
Well, there are issues around the supply and price of childcare in different areas, but I'll make this observation from the Commission's report. It was found in the areas of most disadvantage that actually private sector operators were providing lower prices to families in those areas. But the Commission has always also suggested that over the top of their general subsidy system, that you need to address the pockets of disadvantage right across. And it's not just limited to inner city areas or remote or rural areas. There are pockets of access issues. It's not widespread, and to say that there's a general access or universal access problem, well, the Commission didn't support that view. It is far more specific.
Have you got a time frame on this? When do you hope to deliver?
Well, we hope to bring this package together over the next few weeks and months in the lead up to the budget. It will be a standalone package. It'll be the first instalment of the family stream of measures that we're looking to introduce. There's a jobs package also, there's a small business package, and of course there's a family stream of initiatives which are all designed to do one thing, and that is to help families stay in work, get back to work, particularly for those who, for this is not a choice but is an absolute necessity.
Now, just a couple of questions to end up on, but Peta Credlin, the Chief of Staff of the Prime Minister, is in the news again this weekend. She will be again tomorrow, and yet the Prime Minister is absolutely steadfast. She's sticking with her. Should he do something about that situation?
Oh, I don't run commentaries on staff, Barry. I mean, what the Prime Minister does is his business. He doesn't lecture me on my staff. I don't lecture him on his, because it's not relevant. What's relevant is the work we're doing. I mean, this week we have the major report on childcare from the Productivity Commission. Earlier in the week we were dealing with issues around deeming rates, which was giving additional support to people on part pensions. We're getting on with the job, Barry. I know others are going to want to go into the sort of the days of our lives type commentary of things happening with staff. As frankly, I'm not interested, because I've got a job to do, the Prime Minister's got a job to do, and that's what the Australian people expect us to focus on, and I suspect they suspect the media to focus on the job that needs to be done too.
But it's not about staffing, it's about how government operates. Does the Prime Minister, Chief of Staff, have too much clout, too much authority?
That's not my reading of the situation. The Prime Minister's the Prime Minister. He's the one in charge of this government. He's the one directing the traffic and calling the shots, as it should be, and the ministers are doing the same things in their portfolios every single day of the week. That's what I'm doing, that's what my colleagues are doing, and that's what the Australian people would expect us to do.
Is there any possibility of the leadership question being revisited before the budget?
I don't believe so, and I don't see why it would be. What we're doing is getting on with the job of good government that we're elected to do. And in our first instalment, over the first year and a half, we have had major successes. Stopping the boats being one, of course, but also on the issue of expenditure. We've reduced the real growth in expenditure in the last budget from over 3.5% under the previous government to an average of 1% over the budget and the forward estimates. Now, we're getting Labor's reckless spending under control. We'll continue to do that, but we will do this in an incremental way which takes the families in particular of Australia with us as we deliver for them, but deliver against the enormous budget task and the mess that we've been left by Labor.
So those behind the New South Wales election are comfortable enough with the Prime Minister staying where he is with the election?
Of course he is. We're all out there campaigning with our state colleagues, and Mike Baird is doing a fantastic job here in New South Wales. He's got a real vision for the future of New South Wales, and I think that is being embraced by people right across the state.
And yet the awkward situation you have is that the MPs on the public record say that they will revisit it at some point. The judgments will be made about the Prime Minister beyond the budget, depending on how well he sells it.
Well, I'm not feeling any awkwardness, Barry. What I'm feeling at the moment is the need for us to put a families package in place, a childcare package in place, which helps families make the decisions they need to make about their budgets so they can go back to work where they need to and they can provide for their families. That's what I'm focused on. That's what the government's focused on.
Minister, thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks a lot, Barry. Good to be with you.